And yesterday, we spoke exclusively with Dave Calhoun, the president and CEO of Boeing. And I started by asking him about this dire situation that's facing the airline industry right now. One airline executive described it as apocalyptic, ridership down 95%, half of the commercial fleet just parked. Give us your view from 30,000 feet, so to speak. How grave is the threat to the airline industry?
Well, it is grave. There's no question about it. And apocalyptic does actually accurately describe the moment. I don't think it describes the recovery, and I don't think it describes the medium or long term for the airline industry or aviation in general. As people begin to relive their lives, we expect that they will also get back to traveling. And as long as we can demonstrate the safety of our industry, the safety of our airplane experience, we believe we will return to a growth rate similar to the past, but it might take us 3-5 years to get there.
The money that the government used to bail out the airlines runs out in September, so they're going to have to start laying off people. Do you expect the airlines to be able to survive this? Do you think there might be a major U.S. carrier that just has to go out of business?
Well, I don't want to get too predictive on that subject, but yes, most likely. You know, something will happen when September comes around. Traffic levels will not be back to 100%. They won't even be back to 25. Maybe by the end of the year, we approach 50. So there will definitely be adjustments that have to be made on the part of the airlines.
Whenever it comes back, though, I'm sure you would agree, air travel is going to be looking a lot different. How are you going to convince the flying public that it's safe to get on these planes?
There will be some kind of checkpoint at the airport itself, and if it's a temperature check, as has recently been suggested, I think that's a good thing. Face masks will almost always be required, and they might actually be required by regulators. And then finally, the cabin itself. It's not public knowledge, but believe it or not, that cabin replaces its air every 2 to 3 minutes. It's a remarkable thing. The design of that system inside a cabin was designed to prevent transmission of exactly this kind of airborne carrier. By the time you layer those protections and you consider the responsible actions of the public themselves, I believe you do gradually get back to the same level of confidence that we've had before.
Let's talk about Boeing. You've had to cut 10% of your workforce. When all is said and done, given this environment, do you think Boeing will have to slim down further? Will it be a smaller company?
When the CARES Act was passed, we knew airlines would be in existence in September and thinking about their fleet planning. That gave us a chance to plan for a medium-term production rate. For us, that's roughly 3 years. Between what's on contract and that 3 years, we really do believe there's stability in there. And yes, it is smaller than the footprint we took into the virus. But for what we know now, what we've seen airlines do, and what we've seen by way of government support for airlines, we think we've chosen a good course.
As I'm sure you're aware, that billionaire investor and market mover Warren Buffett sold his stake in US Airlines, and he said he does not think that people will fly as many passenger miles as they did last year. There's just too many planes. Does that send a signal you don't like?
Yes, it certainly does. I don't happen to share the view. I share the near-term turmoil. And near-term for me doesn't mean a few months. I believe it's 3 full years before we return to the traffic levels that we had just in 2019. And then probably another 2 before we begin to return to the growth rates that we used to have. And I'm hopeful that somewhere between here and there, there's a vaccine and that the moment of high anxiety begins to really subside. But I still believe in the future of the industry.
Let's talk about the 737 MAX. Its problems are well known. 2 passenger jet crashes leading to hundreds of fatalities. Production on the MAX stopped. Is the plane going to be a hard sell, though, especially with airlines who are already hanging on to survive?
Well, let me start by just reaffirming my own confidence and our company's confidence in the airplane itself and the safety of it. I will also, in remembrance of the 2 accidents, which were as real as can be, our heartfelt sorrows to everybody who was touched by those accidents. They will create significant changes inside Boeing. They already have. And those things we will use as deep incentives to improve safety every day, every week, every month, for as long as we build, design, produce airplanes. I am confident in the MAX. The certification work, the FAA's work, has been as thorough as anything I've ever seen. We've worked every scenario we can possibly work into the testing programs, and it does exceedingly well.
To be perfectly blunt about it, Boeing faced many problems before the pandemic hit. The crash of 2 737 MAXs, problem with the 787 Dreamliners, the space capsule test flight late last year didn't go off as planned. I know you're the new CEO, but you were on the board for a decade. How do you diagnose the problem? In your mind, how did Boeing, this great American company, lose its way?
We made a bad assumption with respect to the design envelope for that airplane at that moment in time under that condition. Our assumption about how a pilot would react in a very tense, difficult moment was wrong. Simple as that. But I do believe that has been fixed. I also believe in the culture at Boeing. I believe actually all of our employees believe deeply in safety. And have we taken a magnifying glass to everything we do, everything, so that we don't ever allow for something like that to happen in the future.
Speaking of the culture of Boeing, Boeing right now has used its fleet to deliver frontline emergency supplies. What has it meant to you to have the company involved in that way?
The pilots who fly these airplanes around the world to deliver these supplies, I just think about it, it's our front line helping the healthcare front line. And it's pretty magical when it happens, and it is wildly motivating. For me, of course, but mostly for our people, and they need that kind of motivation.
David Calhoun, CEO of Boeing, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Savannah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Our conversation yesterday, it's interesting to hear him, and he definitely feels strong that the industry will recover, but it's going to be a long road, 3 to 5 years, he said, to really bounce back entirely. And that, of course, assumes that we don't have a worse second wave. Everything could change if we got a vaccine. I mean, I think that's the big if that everyone's really wishing and hoping for.
Yeah, it was a fascinating conversation. He was so straight up, too, on every answer.